I trusted him. I believed every word when he kissed me goodbye and said he'd call from the hotel. I didn't know that while I was missing him, he was sleeping next to her. That morning felt ordinary. Painfully, stupidly ordinary. He stood by the doorway with his luggage, that same navy blue suitcase he always took on his business trips. It had a tiny scratch on the corner, one I'd made years ago when we first started dating. I remember teasing him about how he treated it like a travel companion. "It's just a suitcase," I said once, and he smiled, kissed my forehead, and replied, "Yeah, but it always brings me back home to you." I replayed that line for hours after he left. Back then, I thought it was sweet. Now it feels like poison, a line rehearsed too many times to be real. He said his flight was at 9:30 that morning. I made him coffee before he left, the way he liked it, black with a dash of cinnamon. He wore that crisp white shirt I ironed the night before and looked so calm, so in control. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have someone so dedicated, so responsible. While other women complained about lazy husbands, I had one who worked hard, who provided, who always came back to me with stories from faraway cities. I watched him load his suitcase into the trunk, checked my phone for messages, and waved as the car rolled down the street. That sound, the tires fading, would later haunt me. Because that was the sound of someone driving out of my life while pretending to just go to work. The first few hours without him were always strange. The apartment felt too quiet, too clean. I walked into the bedroom, made the bed again even though it didn't need fixing, and scrolled through my phone just to distract myself. He texted around noon. Landed safe. Long meeting later. I'll call before dinner. I smiled at the screen. Back then, that message meant peace. Now, it feels like the start of a story that would end with me staring into the dark, wondering how I could have been so blind. That evening, I made pasta for one. I poured wine into his glass out of habit, then felt ridiculous and poured it back into the bottle. I put on one of our favorite shows, the kind we always watched together. But the laughter track felt cruel, like the world was mocking me for being happy alone. He called around 10. The background sounded busy, muffled voices and what I assumed was a restaurant. He told me he was having dinner with the regional team. "Just work talk, nothing exciting," he said. I laughed and told him I missed him already. He replied, "I'll make it up to you when I'm back." His voice was calm, warm, exactly the tone of a man with nothing to hide. That night, I slept with my phone beside me, just in case he texted again. I remember the way my heart fluttered every time the screen lit up. But it was never him. It was just notifications, ads, and the silence that hides behind routine. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I made coffee for one, again, and sat by the window. The city looked peaceful, almost kind. But something about the quiet felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was holding a secret. He sent another text. "Meetings all day. Don't wait for my call tonight, I'll crash early." I believed him, of course I did. What reason would I have not to? He'd never lied before, or at least, never been caught. By the second day, I noticed something strange. His coworker, Mia, who often traveled with him for these business trips, had posted a story on social media. Just a photo of sunlight reflecting on water, captioned, "Finally, we made it." The location tag said, Malibu. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she'd gone with her boyfriend. Maybe she was on vacation after their meetings. But then, my brain started connecting dots I didn't want to see. The company conference was supposed to be in Chicago. There were no beaches in Chicago, at least not ones with palm trees and waves that looked like that. I clicked on her profile again. She had tagged another account in the comments. A hotel. The same chain where my husband usually stayed for work, but the branch was in California. I froze. My coffee turned cold in my hands. My heart began pounding in that deep, sick rhythm that comes right before a truth hits you. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe his company changed the conference location last minute. But when I texted him, asking how Chicago was, he replied with a single emoji. The airplane one. That's all. No words. Just that. For the first time in our marriage, that silence scared me. That evening, I looked up the flight number he said he took. It didn't exist. The airline didn't even have a flight scheduled for that time. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling, trying to convince myself I made a mistake. Maybe I heard it wrong. Maybe he meant another airline. But deep down, I knew. My gut already knew before my mind caught up. When the truth starts whispering, it doesn't scream. It just lingers, softly, waiting for you to listen. And that night, for the first time, I did. The next morning, I woke up with that feeling. The one that crawls under your skin when something doesn't add up. It wasn't panic yet, not quite. Just the tightness in my chest, the kind that makes you keep checking your phone for a message that never comes. He had said he'd call me in the evening, but he didn't. I told myself he was tired, overworked, maybe asleep. I even drafted a message. Hope your meetings went well, love you, but I didn't send it. It felt forced, like a line I was repeating in a play that no longer made sense. For most of our marriage, I had believed that lies always sounded different from the truth. I thought I would know. I thought love made you immune to deception. But the thing about lies is, when they come from someone you trust, they sound exactly like honesty. We had been together 8 years, married for 3. Our love wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable, predictable in a way that made life easier. He was the quiet one, steady and focused, always buried in his laptop, always polite, always reliable. If he said he was somewhere, I believed him. Now, I couldn't stop replaying our last few months in my head. Every business trip, every late-night meeting, every time he came home smelling faintly of perfume and said it was from the office air freshener, every time I caught him smiling at his phone and he said it was a meme. I wanted to believe that love made people better, but maybe love just makes you blind. I opened my laptop and logged into our joint calendar, the one he insisted we share so we could stay in sync. His schedule was marked as full-day meetings for 3 days straight, with client dinner written in small letters on the last night. Nothing unusual, except for one thing. The city listed at the top said Chicago. Chicago. I stared at the word, as if I could make it real by believing hard enough. Then I did something I had never done before. I searched the conference he claimed to be attending. The website still had the event banner. Cancelled due to low registration. Cancelled. 2 weeks before the date he was supposed to go. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the screen. The silence in the room felt heavier than air. My breathing slowed. I wanted to scream, cry, break something, but all I did was sit, still as glass, while the world rearranged itself around me. When the person you love lies to you, the betrayal doesn't arrive like a crash. It seeps in like water through a crack. Slow, patient, relentless. I closed the laptop and called him. He picked up after the 3rd ring. "Hey," he said, cheerful, as if everything was fine. "Can I call you later? Just wrapping up some reports." There was noise in the background. Laughter, music, a clinking glass. It didn't sound like a hotel bar. It sounded like a restaurant. "Sure," I said. My voice didn't even shake. "Where are you now?" "Just downtown," he said quickly. "Chicago." It was the pause afterward that betrayed him. Half a second too long. The kind of silence that only comes from someone rearranging their lie mid-sentence. I smiled even though he couldn't see me. "Okay," I said softly. "Call me when you're done." We hung up, and I stared at the phone until the screen went black. That night, I couldn't sleep. I turned over every possible explanation in my mind, trying to make sense of the senseless. Maybe he didn't want to worry me. Maybe it was a surprise trip. Maybe he was planning something good. But even the lies I made up to comfort myself sounded hollow. Around midnight, I opened social media again. I went back to his coworker's profile, the one who had posted the beach photo. She had uploaded a new picture, a dinner table by candlelight, 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine, a man's hand in the corner of the frame. I zoomed in. The wristwatch. It was his. The same black-faced silver band watch I had gifted him last Christmas. I could see the reflection of the candlelight glinting off it, the faint scratch across the edge from when it slipped off the table one morning. It was him. He wasn't in Chicago. He wasn't on a business trip. He was there, in Malibu, at dinner with her. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there, frozen, my body heavy and cold. It was like my brain refused to process what my eyes were showing me. I kept zooming in and out, as if the picture might change, as if reality might bend out of pity. But it didn't. The tears came later, not as sobs, but as silent drops that ran down my face while I stared at the ceiling. Every memory felt poisoned. Every smile from the past rewrote itself into a lie. By 3 in the morning, I was wide awake, replaying everything. The way he used to say he hated lying. The way he'd once accused an old friend of cheating and said, "I could never do that to someone." But he had. And the strangest part? He was still pretending to love me while doing it. That realization hurt more than the betrayal itself, that he could compartmentalize it, switch between versions of himself like changing masks. The next day, I decided I needed proof. Something undeniable, something that even he couldn't twist with words. I opened his email on our shared computer. He wasn't careless, he was calculated. But people who lie often forget the smallest details. I found the receipt in the trash folder. It was for a hotel stay. Malibu, 2 guests, 1 king-size bed, 3 nights. The confirmation email had been sent 2 days before he left for Chicago. That was when my chest started to shake. Not from sadness, but from anger so quiet it scared me. He had planned this. He had looked me in the eyes, smiled, kissed me, and lied, not in panic, but with confidence. That kind of lie doesn't come from weakness. It comes from someone who knows exactly what they're doing. I sat there for hours, staring at the screen, at the proof of what I didn't want to believe. When the sun started to rise, I realized I was trembling. My coffee sat untouched on the table, cold and bitter. And in that pale morning light, I finally understood something cruel. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was rehearsing his new life, one where I didn't exist. I didn't plan to check again. I told myself I'd seen enough, that I had all the proof I needed. But curiosity, when mixed with heartbreak, is poison you drink on purpose. It was like I wanted to keep hurting, as if the pain somehow made the betrayal more real. By mid-morning, I was back on social media. His coworker, Mia, had posted a new photo. This one wasn't the beach or a dinner table. It was a candid shot of her sitting by the pool, sunglasses, sun hat, half smile. But it wasn't her that caught my attention. It was the reflection in her lenses. A man, shirtless, standing behind her. His phone raised, taking the photo. The outline of his body, the slope of his shoulders, the tattoo near his collarbone. It was him. My husband. He'd always hated photos, said he wasn't a camera person, but apparently he just wasn't one with me. For a long moment, my breath stopped. I stared at that reflection like it could blink back at me. Every heartbeat was a drum inside my head, echoing against the silence of my apartment. I zoomed in until the image blurred. My eyes burned, my stomach twisted, and then I laughed, a strange, broken sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. That was when the shaking started. Not from fear, but from realization. From the cruel, undeniable truth that while I was counting the hours until he came home, he was counting sunsets with her. I wanted to call him, scream at him, destroy his calm little illusion. But a voice inside me said no. Wait, don't give him control over the ending. So, I waited. He texted me that afternoon. Just finished lunch. Heading into another meeting soon. Miss you. The audacity. The ease. The way he could layer lies with affection like they were the same language. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Hope your meeting goes well. Love you. 3 words. I didn't feel anymore. But I needed him to think I did. Because when someone lies to you that easily, the only power you have left is to make them believe their lie is still working, until you decide it's not. That evening, I went back to her profile again. Another post. This time, a group photo, 4 people, 2 couples, all smiling. The caption, new memories with the best company. He was there, arm around her, smile wide and genuine, the kind he hadn't given me in months. It didn't look like guilt. It didn't even look like excitement. It looked like peace. Like he was finally where he wanted to be. And I think that was what shattered me most, not the cheating itself, but how happy he looked doing it. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, scrolling through old photos of us, trying to remember when the love turned into an act. There was one picture that stood out. The 2 of us at a Christmas party, his arm around me, the same watch glinting under the lights. I remember thinking at the time how lucky I was. Looking at it now, I saw how forced his smile was, how distracted his eyes looked even then. Maybe the truth had been there all along, and I just didn't want to see it. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet, not until I had everything. He thought I was naive, the kind of woman who would fall apart at the first sign of betrayal. He didn't realize I was already falling apart, quietly, methodically, while planning exactly how to expose him. I started small. I called the airline he said he flew with. Hello, I said, trying to sound casual. I'm checking a flight status for my husband. He was on flight 2387 to Chicago, left Tuesday morning. The woman on the phone paused. Ma'am, that flight number doesn't exist. My throat tightened. Are you sure? Yes, ma'am. We don't have any flights to Chicago on that date. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence for a full minute. My hands were trembling, but my heart was calm, eerily calm. It was like the part of me that used to hope had finally died, leaving only logic behind. Next, I called his office. His assistant answered. Oh, he's out this week, she said cheerfully. Business trip, right? Yes, I replied, just confirming. He went to Chicago? Another pause. Then a nervous laugh. No, the Chicago trip got postponed. He said he was taking a few personal days instead. Personal days. I thanked her and hung up. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to stay composed. He had covered every track except one. The people who weren't in on his lie. That evening, I sat on the couch and opened my journal. I hadn't written in months, but the words poured out like venom. Every line was a confession I'd never spoken aloud. He thinks, I don't know. He thinks I'm still waiting for him to come home, but I'm not the same woman he left. By the time the sun went down, my anger had sharpened into clarity. I started printing screenshots, saving photos, backing up messages. I wanted him to see how thoroughly I'd uncovered everything. Not because I needed him to admit it, but because I wanted to look him in the eyes when he realized I'd known all along. That night, I got another text. Flight back home tomorrow morning. Can't wait to see you. I stared at the message, reading it over and over. Can't wait to see you. It was almost funny. He had no idea that the woman waiting for him now wasn't the same one he left behind. I typed back, I'll be here. Simple, calm, perfect. Then I turned off my phone, laid down in the dark, and whispered the truth to myself for the first time. He was never in Chicago. He was in her bed. And tomorrow, when he walked through that door pretending to be my husband again, he was going to find out exactly what it feels like to be caught. Morning came like a cruel reminder that time doesn't stop just because your world has. The sun spilled through the blinds, the same way it always did, and the city outside went on living, indifferent to the quiet storm brewing in my chest. I got out of bed before the alarm went off. There was no reason to, but sleep had become impossible. My head was full of his voice, the casual lies, the calm tone, the way he'd say, I'll call you soon, as if he meant it. The words echoed like ghosts in a house I no longer recognized. He was flying home that day. Or at least, he said he was. I didn't bother replying to his morning text. It was short, like always. Boarding now. Can't wait to be home. I stared at it for a while, wondering how someone could lie so smoothly. I used to think liars hesitated, that their guilt showed through pauses and stammers. But he taught me something new. Real liars don't hesitate. They just rewrite reality until you start doubting your own memory. I decided to make coffee, the way I used to for both of us. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and bitter, and for a moment I could almost pretend things were normal. But then my eyes landed on his empty mug on the counter, the one with the chipped handle, and I felt that familiar twist in my stomach. I sat at the table, coffee untouched, laptop open. I already had proof, the photos, the flight records, the email receipts, but I needed something more, something undeniable, something that would silence every excuse before it left his mouth. I opened our shared bank account. He had used the same card for everything, confident that I'd never look too closely. But people make mistakes when they're too sure of themselves. And there it was. A hotel charge, Malibu, dated 2 nights ago. Room service, cocktails, 2 meals. The amount was high, too high for one person. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't surprise anymore. It was confirmation. The final piece snapping into place, locking the truth in. For a few minutes, I couldn't move. The house was too quiet, the clock ticking too loudly. Every second sounded like an accusation. When you finally catch a liar, the strangest thing happens. You stop feeling like a victim. The sadness burns away, leaving only clarity. Cold, sharp, dangerous clarity. I closed the laptop slowly and stared at the empty chair across the table. That was where he always sat, pretending to be tired from work trips, kissing my forehead before heading to bed early. I thought of all those nights I'd massaged his shoulders, told him I was proud of him. Every word of support I'd given was feeding his lie. Not anymore. Around noon, I started cleaning, not out of habit, but out of ritual. I folded laundry, wiped the counters, put away dishes. The apartment needed to look exactly like it always did. Perfect, familiar, safe. He wouldn't see it coming. His flight, according to the schedule he'd sent me, was supposed to land around 3:15 p.m. That meant he'd be home by 4. I spent the next few hours preparing, not for a confrontation, but for a revelation. I printed everything. The screenshots, the receipts, the photo of his watch reflected in her sunglasses. I laid them out neatly on the dining table, proof in plain sight. No explanations needed. And then I waited. The minutes stretched, heavy and slow. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the silence. Every sound outside, a car door, footsteps, the elevator ding, made my pulse spike. At 3:52, I heard his key turn in the lock. For a moment, everything went still. The door opened, and there he was, my husband. Same smile, same suitcase, same tired voice pretending to sound relieved. "Hey," he said, closing the door behind him. "You have no idea how good it feels to be home." I didn't speak. I just watched him, studying every movement, the way he avoided eye contact, the way he took a deep breath before walking farther into the room. He set his suitcase by the wall and stretched, like a man returning from a long, honest trip. He looked around, confused, when he saw the papers on the table. "What's all this?" I tilted my head, my voice calm. "Souvenirs." He blinked. "What?" "From your trip. WS-20. He smiled awkwardly, that same practiced expression I'd once mistaken for kindness. "Babe, what are you talking about?" I stood up slowly and slid one of the photos toward him. The beach shot, the one with his reflection in her glasses. His face drained of color. "I found her profile," I said quietly. "You might want to tell her to stop tagging hotels in her posts. Makes it hard to believe you were in Chicago." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "This isn't what it looks like." The words were so predictable, they almost made me laugh. "Then tell me what it is," I said. My tone wasn't angry. It was measured, deliberate, the way you'd speak to a stranger you're done pretending to care about. He stared at the photo, searching for a lie big enough to cover the truth. "That's an old picture," he said finally. I slid the hotel receipt across the table. "From 2 days ago?" Silence. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. He looked smaller somehow, his confidence collapsing under the weight of evidence. "Listen," he started. "I didn't mean for—" "No," I interrupted softly. "You meant every bit of it. The flight, the hotel, the texts. You planned it." He took a step toward me, hands raised as if calming an animal. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked. "How you managed to live 2 lives at once? How you looked me in the eyes before leaving and said you loved me?" He hesitated. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." I smiled. A bitter, quiet smile. "That's the thing about liars. It always goes farther than you think." He dropped his gaze, his voice breaking. "I messed up. I know I did. I didn't want to hurt you." I stared at him for a long time. That line, "I didn't want to hurt you," was the final insult. As if every lie, every night spent in someone else's bed, had somehow been an act of mercy. "You didn't hurt me," I said. "You killed something. There's a difference." The silence after that was heavy, like the air itself was mourning what used to be. He tried to speak again, but I stopped him. "I don't want your apology. I just wanted you to see how easy it was to find the truth. All it took was one photo, one careless post. You did all this work to hide, and still, it took me 2 days to unravel it." He stood there, motionless, eyes wet but unreadable. Maybe he was crying. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was just fear of losing control. I stepped closer, close enough to see the panic flicker in his pupils. "You don't have to pack anything," I said quietly. "Just go. Before I remember how much I loved you." He didn't argue. He picked up his suitcase and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, soft and final. And then it was just me. The apartment felt strange, bigger, emptier, almost peaceful. The table was still covered in paper proof of the life I thought I had. I sat down, staring at the chaos he left behind, and realized something that surprised me. I wasn't broken. I was free. For the first time in years, there were no lies left in the room. And yet, even in that silence, his words still echoed in my head. "Can't wait to be home." He was. Just not with me. The silence after he left wasn't peace. It was the echo of everything I'd lost, trying to hold on to something that was already gone. The door had barely clicked shut, and yet his presence still lingered in the air. His scent, his voice, the ghost of his routine. It was strange how absence could feel so solid, like a shadow you couldn't push away. For a long time, I didn't move. I sat at the table, staring at the scattered papers, the proof that my life had been built on something hollow. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, and my reflection in the mug looked like someone else, someone who'd aged in a single week. Eventually, I got up and walked to the bedroom. His side of the closet was still full, the shirts lined up by color, the ties I used to pick out for him, the cologne bottle half empty on the shelf. I ran my fingers along the hangers, feeling that slow, growing ache in my chest. He had taken his suitcase, but not much else. Maybe he thought he'd be back. Maybe part of him believed I'd forgive him. He underestimated me. That night, he started calling, First once, then again, then a third time. I didn't answer. His messages came next, short, pathetic bursts of desperation. Please, just talk to me. You don't understand. I made a mistake. Mistake. That word made my stomach twist. As if you could accidentally spend nights in someone else's bed. I left the phone on silent and sat by the window instead. Outside, the city lights flickered like scattered thoughts. I wondered how many people down there were living the same story, waiting for a call, believing a lie, making excuses for someone who didn't deserve them. The next morning, there was a knock on the door. 3 slow taps, familiar and hesitant. I didn't move at first. Then I opened it, just enough to see his face. He looked wrecked. Unshaven, tired, eyes red. He tried to smile, but it came out like a flinch. "Can we talk?" he asked. I could have slammed the door. I should have. But some cruel part of me wanted to see how far he'd go, what new performance he'd deliver to try and save himself. So I opened it wider and stepped aside. He walked in carefully, like a man entering a crime scene. His eyes flicked to the table. The evidence was still there. He sighed, rubbed the back of his neck, and muttered, "You've always been thorough." I said nothing. He sat down and stared at the floor. I don't know what to say. "Try the truth," I said. He nodded slowly, as if that were some kind of noble idea. "It started months ago," he said. "The first trip to Dallas. Remember that one? We'd been arguing a lot, and I felt disconnected. She was there. It just happened." I laughed softly. "It just happened," I repeated. "That's your excuse?" He looked up, pain flickering across his face. "I know it sounds awful. I wasn't trying to replace you. It was just convenient," I finished for him. "Easier than fixing what was broken." He ran his hand through his hair. I didn't plan for it to keep going, but it did, and then I didn't know how to stop. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You didn't stop because you didn't want to. Don't insult me with half-truths." His shoulders slumped. "You're right." That quiet admission should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt hollow, because no confession could bring back the person I was before this. He looked up again, eyes wet. "I miss you," he said softly. "I miss us. Please, I'll do anything. I'll cut contact with her. I'll go to therapy, whatever it takes." I studied him. The man sitting in front of me looked small, not because he was crying, but because I could finally see him without the illusion of love. Every excuse, every apology, every desperate gesture was a mirror reflecting who he really was, a coward who wanted forgiveness without consequence. "You think saying sorry fixes it?" I asked. "You burned down everything we built, and now you want me to pretend it's just smoke?" He shook his head. "No, I can't lose you." I took a slow breath. "You already did." He froze. I could see the moment the words sank in, the exact second he realized there was no coming back. His jaw clenched. He looked down, then back up, his eyes colder now. "You're really done?" "Yes." He stood up, his expression shifting into something I'd seen only once before, that mix of pride and panic, the face of a man losing control. "Fine," he said. "But don't pretend you're innocent in all this. You were distant too. You stopped caring." The words hit like a slap. That's how cheaters survive, by rewriting the story until they're the victims. I walked closer, close enough to smell the faint trace of her perfume still clinging to his shirt. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did stop caring, just not soon enough." He blinked, startled. "I stopped caring the day you decided my trust was something you could borrow," I continued. "And now you can keep it. I don't need it back." He stared at me, searching for some trace of the woman who used to forgive him. But she was gone. "Get out," I said. He hesitated, maybe waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, he finally turned and walked to the door. Before leaving, he looked back once, eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe, or just the fear of losing a soft place to land. When the door closed, I exhaled slowly. My hands were trembling, but it wasn't weakness. It was release. The shaking of a body that's finally done carrying too much. I gathered the papers from the table and dropped them into the trash. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need proof. I had the truth, and it was enough. I walked to the window again. The city lights had started to flicker on, just like before, but this time they looked different. Sharper, colder, real. He'd taken a piece of my heart with him, but what was left wasn't broken. It was honest. And in that honesty, I found something close to peace. It's strange how fast someone disappears from a space they once filled completely. 2 days after he left, the apartment already felt different. The silence was cleaner, the air lighter. His toothbrush sat untouched by the sink, his favorite mug still beside the coffee machine, but they were just objects now, pieces of a life that no longer existed. I kept expecting him to call. Maybe part of me even wanted him to, not to reconcile, but to hear what version of the story he'd tell next. But the phone stayed quiet. The absence became its own kind of comfort. In the evenings, I sat by the window with the lights off, watching the city move on without us. It felt like the world was teaching me something I'd ignored for years. That endings don't come with music or closure, just stillness. The first few nights were the hardest. Sleep was a stranger, and my mind was a reel of memories on loop. His laugh, the way he used to trace circles on my palm when he thought I was asleep, the soft lies he wrapped in affection. I hated how my body still remembered him, even when my heart didn't want to. One night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of rain, the kind of heavy, steady rain that drowns the world in whispers. I walked into the living room and sat on the floor beside the window, watching the drops streak across the glass. The city lights blurred behind them, soft and distant. That's when I cried. Not out of sadness, but out of release. It was as if all the words I never said, all the questions I never asked, were leaving my body with every breath. The truth is, I'd spent so long being strong for someone who didn't deserve it that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be strong for myself. The next morning, I cleaned the apartment again, this time with purpose. I packed his things into boxes, shirts, shoes, framed photos, even that ridiculous tie he said was lucky. Each item went in quietly, like a memory I was finally putting to rest. When I sealed the last box, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something quieter, acceptance. Not forgiveness, but the understanding that some people just aren't built to love honestly. Around noon, I got a text from him. "I'm sorry. I don't expect you to respond. I just wanted to say, I never stopped loving you." I stared at the words, the way he tried to make guilt sound like devotion. I typed a reply and deleted it 3 times before sending the only thing that felt true. "You love the way I made you feel, not me." Then I blocked his number. That was the last time I ever heard from him. In the days that followed, life slowly began to take shape again. I went back to work, smiled at people who didn't know anything about my story, and started learning how to live without waiting for a message, a call, or an apology. Sometimes, I caught myself talking to the silence, narrating my thoughts as if he were still there. But the difference now was that the words were for me, my own private confessions. One evening, about a month later, I passed by a cafe we used to visit on weekends. The smell of roasted coffee and cinnamon hit me like déjà vu. I almost kept walking, but something made me stop. Inside, a couple sat at our old table, laughing quietly. They looked happy, genuinely happy. For a moment, it hurt, but then something shifted. I didn't envy them. I pitied them just a little, because I knew that even the sweetest moments could hide cracks too small to see. I left the cafe and walked home in the cool night air. The city hummed around me, alive and uncaring. For the first time, I realized I wasn't scared of being alone. Solitude wasn't punishment anymore. It was freedom, the kind that comes after surviving the worst version of love. That night, I opened my journal again. The pages were filled with anger and confusion, but now I wrote something different. Calm, simple, final. Love isn't what you say. It's what you protect when no one's watching. I closed the book and set it aside. Then I walked to the window, watching the streetlights flicker against the darkness. Somewhere out there, he was probably lying to someone else, starting over with new words, new promises. But he would never have what I had now. Peace. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd learned, and whispered the line that had been forming in my head since the day I found out. He said it was a business trip, but what he really planned was the end of us. For a moment, the room felt weightless, as if the story had finally exhaled through me. And then there was only silence, the kind that no longer hurts, the kind that finally feels like truth.